Well, we left home and 12 hours later we find ourselves at Willow Creek Hot Springs under extremely smoky skies.
Our oldest daughter, Annette, will be accompanying us on this trip. She has a few days off, so we're going to make the best of it out here in the Oregon desert. Since we're not far from Willow Creek Hot Springs, why not get ready and slip in Willow Creek Hot Springs and test that nice hot water as the sun disappears down behind smoky skies. Our short soak in Willow Hot Springs was well worth it, since Annette has some property a short distance from here. We can stay in here as long as we want tonight, and then we'll make the short trip out to her property, where I've put a fence around an old trailer house, but that seems to be very comfortable to spend a few days in. When we reach the property, we find the little antelope ground squirrels are there to greet us, and they were wondering if maybe we by chance would have a spare peanut, which they pack off and bury. We're getting ready to go to the Owyhee River. Marge has the idea that if she covers things up, it'll be a lot better in the pickup. We travel down a dusty little two-track road for about 7.5 miles till we come to the county road, or White Horse Ranch Road. The White Horse Ranch Road is much smoother, but still it has plenty of dust. We stop at the Owyhee Park. It's where they launch boats to get some drinking water. The Owyhee River runs slow and deep through this section, but don't let that fool you. It becomes quite wild downstream a ways farther. It's a very calm, smoky morning on the Owyhee River, not a ripple in the river. Past the old town of Danner and on to Inskip Station. It was founded in 1863, and it served as a safe place during Indian troubles, for the few residents that live here could go in there and be rather safe. It had shooting ports and everything, like a miniature fort. It was even used a time or two when the Indians were restless.
Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, 1805 to 1866. This site marks the final resting place of the youngest member of the Lewis and Clark expedition, born to Sacagawea and Toussaint Charbonneau at Fort Mandan, North Dakota, on February 11, 1805. Baptiste and his mother symbolize the peaceful nature of the Corps of Discovery. Educated by Captain William Clark at St. Louis, Baptiste at age 18 traveled to Europe, where he spent 6 years, becoming fluent in English, German, French, and Spanish, returning to America in 1829. He ranged the far west for nearly 4 decades as mountain man, guide, interpreter, magistrate, and 49er. In 1866, he left the California goldfields for a new strike in Montana. Contracted pneumonia en route, reached Inskip's Ranch here, and died on May 16, 1866.
He was buried in a family cemetery which has several other graves in it under the wide and starry skies of southeast Oregon. The grave itself looks almost like a traditional Indian burial.
Okay.
Jean-Baptiste Pompe Charbonneau, son of Sacagawea. This plaque is dedicated as a memorial to Jean-Baptiste Pompe Charbonneau, whose personal life experience elevated him to national recognition in American history. He began his road of life on an epic journey westward. The youngest person accompanying the Lewis and Clark expedition, Pompe was carried in a cradleboard by his mother Sacagawea, Elemi Shoshone. Following the death of Sacagawea in 1812, young Pompe came under the guardianship of Captain William Clark and was schooled in St. Louis, Missouri. He spent 6 years in Europe and Africa. While abroad, he learned to speak English, Spanish, German, and French fluently, in addition to several native languages he already knew. During his stay overseas, he accompanied and was hosted by a German royal family, the Wilhelms of Württemberg. He then returned back to the States, where he served as alcalde of San Luis Rey, California. His love for adventure and free spirit brought him full circle back to the natural wonders from whence he traveled as an infant child. As a guide, he taught others to appreciate the natural beauty of this great nation. We commemorate his triumph as a true example of adventure and freedom, a spirit that characterizes the great American West. All those Sacagawea coins that are gone,
Yeah.
that's just...
I don't know whether it was theft or somebody thought they were cleaning up.
How could you...
You know,
Look at this pretty fit.
coins on
Coins
graves.
on graves, that's a tradition for since I don't even know when, but that's like way traditional.
Yeah. What's that little bottle of stuff there?
Looks like sand.
Is that black sand from Hawaii?
No, it's blue and I don't know. It's artificial sand.
Yeah.
No, I can't remember what I mean, that's like, there's a special significance of coins on graves. I looked it up one time. I can't remember what it means.
Yeah.
But no, that's like...
After this very important bit of precious history, we decide to head on down to the Owyhee Canyon. It'll be about 36 miles to Three Forks. We stop at the Owyhee Canyon overlook to look over the humongous canyon below us. The Owyhee River was named by some Hawaiian fur trappers which hitched a ride over on an old sailing ship to trap in the Owyhee Canyon. They said, hey, this place looks like the Big Island. Let's name it Hawaii. But they didn't know how to spell Hawaii in English, so that's how it has this rather unusual name. We now start our descent down into the canyon itself. After about 35 miles of rough, tooth-jarring road, we now start climbing down into the canyon. Switchback after switchback. Every switchback, we realize we're getting closer to the Owyhee River. The Three Forks was a very important place for the pioneers. It had all the old 1860s roads which went to various places throughout Oregon. It was through the Oregon Desert. It was the old military road which was used for Indian fighting. And they even had sort of a little fort down here, and they kept men and extra horses here to pull wagons up out of the canyon like the mail wagon heading for Silver City, Idaho. A high clearance four-wheel drive vehicle is recommended for these roads because they can get pretty nasty at certain times. And if it's raining a bunch, just plain don't try it. you'll just slide around and be mud all over everything. Switchback after switchback. Each switchback takes us closer and closer to our final destination of the Owyhee River, and we can look over the whole country from up here, and we see there's not another soul camped down there, so it looks like we've got it all to ourselves.
The old military dugout where a few people stayed, and they had extra horses here to help pull the wagons out of the canyon back in the 1800s, right up that road.
Looks like our favorite campsite is open, so we'll waste no time going in here and setting up camp. And meanwhile, I've got to tie up some lines and get it ready for 'em to fish. And Marge, of course, is the first one down to the fishing hole, and then a net follows, and the fish are biting as usual. These bass bite really good, and it seems like there's plenty of them in. We caught some grasshoppers, and we're using them for bait, but it seemed like they were sort of hard to catch, and we had some worms, and they worked equally as well. So they just used worms. Wow, look at that guy fight. Marge has got one on.
Don't horse him,
Trying
huh?
to get him in.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a small one.
Bring him up and let's look at him. I guess he'll be alright, won't he?
Yeah, I guess so. Oh, he's not too bad. See?
Hold him up and let's take a look at him.
He's bloody anyway. But he's not a very big one.
Oh, it's decent size.
See?
Yeah.
Let's see, where's your line in there?
Right here.
It's under her line.
Yeah.
Under?
You're safe.
Where's the fish?
He's coming. He's coming. He's a big one. He's
Oh, it's a nice one. Don't lose him. Oh, look how big he is. Oh, nice. He's a keeper. Biggest one. Gee. Hold him up. Darn.
Oh my gosh, he's huge.
Nice fish, Larry.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's now Annette's turn to hook on to one of these smallmouth bass.
Is it coming?
Well, I don't know.
You think she's got one?
Yeah. No.
Oh, wait a second. Little one. See the throwback. Mom, you have your pliers?
He's still on.
He's alright.
Yeah, he's
There you go.
Yeah. There, hold him up and we'll take a look at him.
You want to get my camera or my, yeah, there it is. Oh, he's all bloody.
There. Nice fish.
One fish after another were thrown up on the bank out of the calm waters of the Owyhee River. We can look across and see the Indian cave. This was inhabited by Stone Age man thousands of years ago. One fish at a time. Our stringers are starting to fill up, and we're only allowed 5 fish per person.
He's all right.
Yeah, he's a nice one.
Oh yeah, he's pretty decent size.
Fillet him and take him to the trailer house and freeze him. So we'll make
Here, you want to get a picture of me? I'll sit behind.
Get my fingers out of the way. Hey, it's supposed to be held like this, isn't it? Yeah, why in the world are you doing things like that when I'm helping you?
A group of merrigansers are standing on an island, preening their feathers. This is probably a family group, a pair with a bunch of their young. Then some otters appear. They were wanting us to put our fish on a stringer and leave them in the water, and they'd watch after them real well while we would go to the hot springs. They're just real nice fellas. Last time we had some fish on a stringer and turned our back for a minute, and when we turned around, the fish were all gone. And I don't know who's to blame, but that guy there looks like there's plenty of guilt for all of them, I would think. It's probably a family of them again. The young are out hunting on their own. It's been only in recent years that we've seen so darn many otter here. I guess maybe they're increasing in number tremendously, and no one is trapping much because fur isn't worth much now. So the otter are free to swim free and fish on their own all they want. They're very much at home in the water, and they can be lightning quick under the water, fast enough to grab a fish on the run. They're sure curious and playful little guys. They like to put on a show whenever there's a camera around. Looks as though there's some adults and some young both here. The next morning, it's back to fishing again. We're allowed 5 fish per day and a 2-day limit on a possession limit. So we're each allowed to take 10 fish back with us. So that's what we'll do, and then we'll fillet them and freeze them to take home. Annette just landed one more for her limit. Pretty soon we have our limit. We take our camp apart and head up for the hot springs. It's about 2.5 miles up, and since we're limited on time, we'll just drive up, but it's an extremely rocky, rough road up. But you can make it with a good 4-wheel drive with high clearance. It's not that much of a problem. The road takes us high above the river, and we can look across and see a waterfall coming in from a side canyon, and all that water is hot water. Then we head down the road to the Owyhee River, and there's probably no fewer than a dozen hot springs come out here in the canyon. We go past some very lush poison ivy along the trail's edge. Then we cross numerous little hot springs coming out right in the road.
Clover leaf on it. That's sweet clover down. See all down along that road on the left?
Oh.
That's sweet clover.
This is sweet clover?
Wait just a second, Marge.
I gotta clean the rocks out of my screen. This is sweet clover?
Yeah.
Okay. Here, I gotta get a picture.
Yeah, it looks like the white sweet clover here. There's white and yellow.
Annette's interested in the sweet clover because that's what warfarin's made of, and she works in a clinic where they give warfarin to people that have had strokes and other things. So that's of interest to her. We see some thistles blooming, and the bees are working hard to pollinize it. Little springs come out in the road all the way down, and plenty of tule weeds. Lots of tall sweet clover going along trail's edge as we head to the river. This bottom is very fertile, and it's irrigated by numerous hot springs coming out. So things grow really, really big here. We wade across the Owyhee River and take the trail up the other side. The trail is one of the old military roads. There's a big eddy just across the river, and in the middle of the eddy, what do we see but another family of otters? These are different than the ones we saw down below. This is a whole nother group of them just working in here, playing in the water. One of them has something in his mouth, probably a fish that he's getting ready to take up on the bank and maybe share with the others, or maybe he'll keep it all for himself. They're just all over the place. And now we hike up the old military road for a bit. We can look back at the river and see the otters are still playing in the water. It looks to me like they're eating a fish or something there. Then we come to where the bridge is out on the old military road, and right below it is the hot springs. So we'll climb down the rocks and try that wonderful hot water. There's a great flow and it's nice and clear. After the hot springs, it's time to get back to camp and get our fish froze. And the ground squirrels are here again to greet us. This one's little baby John, and he's one of the head peanut eaters. And then there's one named Stretch. He always stretches way out before he gets a drink of water or eats a peanut. And then there's Jasper. He's named after the old homesteader that homesteaded one of the areas around Willow Creek. They're pretty particular fellas. They got to get that peanut just right in their mouth before they take it. And then they eat what they want, and then they bury the rest. And at night, the kangaroo rats come in and sniff them out and dig them up and eat them. So their efforts are kind of in vain. But boy, they move fast and work hard on it. Whenever they're out in the open, they try to move fast. And one time, when we were watching them, a big bird flew over, casting a shadow. And boy, there wasn't a ground squirrel in sight for a little while. He wasn't taking any chances of getting eaten by. These are the antelope ground squirrel, the white-tailed antelope ground squirrel, and supposedly they make their own water and never have to take a drink in their entire life. But if the water's there, they don't mind consuming a little bit of it. We give him a few sunflower seeds and a few pumpkin seeds. It looks as though he's stowing them away in his pouch. And maybe a little drink of water will make him go down better when he decides to swallow them. These aren't usually a pest. These little squirrels are more a solitary squirrel, and they're quite bashful. Usually you don't see but one at a time. But When they found out there were some peanuts, a few of them showed up. But of course, we're only here very seldom, so they don't get very many peanuts in their diet. They have to go to their natural diet most of the time. Each one of these little ground squirrel has these individual personalities, which you get to know after a while. And since they're more of a solitary animal, they don't all act exactly the same. They kind of like it here in the shade of the trailer house, and of course those nuts and seeds sure do taste good to them, but they'll have to go on back to their natural diet, because we won't be here long, and they probably know it. He checks out some of the seeds, some of the peanuts which are empty, but he can tell that in a second. They run around with tremendous energy and search for more peanuts, and then when there are no more peanuts to be had, then they go on out and partake of their natural diet of seeds and roots and things that they would normally eat. Those almonds may be kind of expensive, but that doesn't mean they aren't good, because he sure likes it. The next morning, the sun is almost obscured by the smoke from forest fires, but we decide to go down and hunt some petrified wood. After all, what's a trip to the desert without a trip down to find some of that?
You can see it. He's
gonna land.
Where'd he go?
He's
He's right over at those rocks.
Oh, there
he landed.
He landed
On a rock?
Yeah,
Right.
straight ahead.
Not on the road, but on a rock.
Just
rock
yeah,
to
it's
the
just below the road, straight ahead. I forgot to bring my binoculars.
I got a pair right here.
And peck on it to kill it, and then he realizes that we're still watching, and he thinks we might try to steal it from him. So he takes to wing, holding this rattlesnake in his talons, heading probably for the nest to share it with some others. Then in the road, we notice one of the sage grouse. That's our largest grouse in North America, and they're a symbol of the West. What a beauty of a bird, and he's big and handsome. There were two of them here, and I expect there were more back in the brush. Yeah. The one closest to us looks to be a young. I see his feathers aren't as smooth as the other one, and he looks a little bit smaller. So I'll bet that's one of the young, and there's probably a whole bunch more back in the brush. That's kind of the way they operate. Some of them will get out in the open while the others hide, and that definitely looks like a young one.
Disaster Peak under smoky skies.
We will move along a decent road for quite a ways, and then our road will turn to a 2-track road, and we go on up to our favorite digging site. Marge's.
Wow.
No, those are big too. See?
Yeah.
Those are big too.
Well, if you get that one, you're done.
Yeah. Well, see, she's
I
allowed
gotta weigh my stuff.
You're allowed
25 pounds plus one.
Yeah, but with those two big ones, that's gotta be. You gotta have 25 pounds.
Yeah. Wow.
That's my big one for the day. I can't believe it.
Wow, that's a nice one.
That's unbelievable. How much do you think? Okay, you want to look at it?
We soon have our daily limit of 25 pounds plus 1. When we get back, we decide to go out to Coyote Lake and look it over. It's a dry lake bed out by Annette's property. We have fashioned a little thing with wheels, and then we go up to the Columbia River and get the sails they use on the river that are outdated and out of style for them, but we don't know the difference, and so we sail on this lake. We always like to look at these moving rocks. They move and make a trail similar to the things that have baffled scientists and laymen alike in Death Valley at what they call the racetrack. And we see several of them here that have moved. They don't always move every year, but usually they do. And we can see the trail here where this one's moved, and we have too. We look around at the trails. This one, it moved right from where I was, and they don't make a straight line necessarily.